Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody is doing well. So it looks like the Democrats and the mainstream media have found the issue that they are going to ride into the midterm elections. They've danced around a few different issues. The DACA kids were one for a while, but Trump kind of already offered amnesty and a path to citizenship to three times the amount that Obama offered without a pathway to citizenship. So that didn't really stick. They wanted to make it out like he was going to, bring us to nuclear war, but then he went and started peace conversations with North Korea, and they tried to make it out like he was a buffoon for doing that. None of that stuff really stuck. They tried to make it out to be the Mueller investigation, but of course, the more information that comes out about the Mueller information, we just see that it was really the deep state working against Donald Trump and for Hillary Clinton. So that's kind of working into his favor. But now it looks like they've got it. And of course, you know what it is if you've opened a newspaper or turned on cable news in the last few days. The issue is children being separated from their parents at our southern border. And I got to say, I think this one is going to stick a lot more than the other ones did. And I think this is something. They say the midterm elections are all about who can gin up their base. It's all about turnout. And I think this is something that will motivate the anti-Trumpers to get out and vote. And I get it. I mean, if look, it's horrific, and it really is a moral outrage. And if you look at some of these pictures of the children, that audio tape that MSNBC is playing, I think every 15 seconds or so, it's really, really horrific stuff. And I don't think, even if you see this as a fairly complicated, nuanced issue, as I do, I don't think there's any admission in that. I think, we can be a decent person about this stuff and say, yeah, this is really brutal. This is a naked example of the state's brutality, and it's unfortunate. It's really bad, and I will say that I think this zero tolerance application of the law was a bad idea. I think Jeff Sessions has absolutely no, when it comes to locking people up or the government seizing people, Jeff Sessions just has no conscience. And this is a guy who, when he was asked about people being locked in cages for marijuana, he responded by saying, good people don't smoke weed. That's the level of thinking that he's put into these things. So, I don't think I think it's wrong. I think in general, zero tolerance is always wrong. Whether you're talking about suspending kids from school or it's immigration at the border, it's never a great idea. And so I think it's wrong morally and politically. I think it's just a really bad idea. I think Trump was actually doing pretty well and was on his way to kind of eliminating that blue wave that we kept hearing about. And I think this gives it new life. So anyway, all accounts, I think it's bad. But it's a complicated issue. And, I did a whole podcast on this today, my latest episode of Part of the Problem. If you want to hear like a longer form, me diving into my take on this. But for these videos, I try to keep it kind of short. But I do think it's kind of necessary to at least break down a little bit more of what's going on here. Okay. So first, I would say that it's worth taking into account, looking at the bigger picture of this, that the United States of America lets in more immigrants into our country than any other country in the world legally. I think it's somewhere around 1 million a year that we let in. The vast majority of them are non-white. The vast majority of them are from far poorer countries than us. Okay. The demographics in America are changing in a pretty profound way in the not-so-distant future. And people on the left talk about this all the time, and they're very happy of it. They call it the browning of America. And, you turn on any MSNBC show, and they talk about this quite gleefully. And they're like thrilled that whites are going to be a minority in this country. I think within 20, 30 years, we're projected to be a majority Hispanic nation. And Donald Trump, the most unlikely of all candidates for to be president, he burst onto the scene and was the only person, it seemed like, who really addressed this issue. The immigration was the center of Donald Trump's issue, of Donald Trump's campaign. It was his main issue, and he was like, look, we are going to stop this. We're going to deport the people who are here illegally. We're going to build a wall. We're not letting more people in. And look, a lot of people, myself included, did not think Donald Trump was a serious candidate, did not think this would resonate the way it did. But what happened was Donald Trump got more votes in the Republican primary than any Republican has ever gotten in history. And he ended up getting about 63 million people to vote for him in the general election, won the Electoral College, and was elected president of the United States of America. And I think to the vast majority of people who hate Trump, the resistance, the left-wingers in this country, it's as simple as like, well, he's a bigot, he appealed to the bigots, and that's that. So, okay, look, I'm not even saying there's no truth to that. I'm not saying that there's no bigotry behind the Trump movement, but I think it's a lot more complicated than that, and I think you're going to miss out on what's really going on here if you just dismiss everybody who you disagree with as a bigot. I think, in general, the major driving force behind the Trump campaign was a rejection of these demographic changes in America. And I don't know that there's anything uniquely bigoted about that. I mean, I think if you went to Italy and you said, hey, look, I've got some wonderful projections that in the next couple decades, this will no longer be a majority Italian country. Isn't that great, guys? I think most people in Italy would be like, no, that's not great. We like this being Italian. If you went to Japan and you said, hey, wonderful demographic changes coming up, this is going to be a majority Korean country in a couple decades. Isn't that great, guys? I think they'd say no. And I don't necessarily think that means that they're like Nazis. I think it's just people largely are going to reject that. And the truth is that the people who supported Donald Trump, like, they never got a vote in this. They never decided that they wanted the demographics of the country to change. They didn't decide that they wanted all of this immigration plus illegal immigration on top of it. And when they did get a vote, they voted for Donald Trump. And this was his central, as I said, the central issue of his campaign. Okay? So it's just worth, taking that into consideration. Now, what's going on with the immigration thing here is that, look, Democrats really like this idea. And again, this isn't like a conspiracy theory. They will talk about this openly. They like the idea of importing voters for the Democratic Party. And it's not just that the next generation overwhelmingly goes for the Democrats. There are a lot of illegal immigrants who vote already in this country. This stuff is not conspiracy theory. It's not. It's like, look, in Illinois, for example, right? And this is true all over the country with lots of different states. In Illinois, in order to vote, you need an ID and a proof of address. Okay? There's no proof of citizenship required. You need an ID and a proof of address. And the city of Chicago just started issuing ID cards that were designed for illegal immigrants, which you can use to vote. Okay? Now, what the way they test whether or not you're a citizen is when you vote, you have to basically sign your name that you're a citizen. That's it. That's the only test. So, I mean, that's all that's going on. Now, of course, no Chicago politicians would never do anything shady to try to get some more votes, right? Like, that's beyond the pale. So there's a lot of that going on here, right? Now, this is what Democrats like out of it. And then there's like the Chamber of Commerce Republicans who they represent basically big corporations, and they love the cheap labor. So they're very into immigration. All of them. So they basically made this deal, this alliance that, okay, we'll just have unfettered immigration. We get the cheap labor. You get the votes. And who doesn't get a vote in this are all of the people who supported Donald Trump. They get no say in the immigration policy. And look, even for you progressives out there, even Bernie Sanders, you can go look this up. When he was interviewed at the beginning of his campaign in 2016 by Ezra Klein, and he asked him, like, how do you feel about open borders? Bernie Sanders was like, absolutely no. Absolutely not. Open borders are horrible. He said that's a Koch brothers policy. That was Bernie Sanders' quote. Then he was trying to, win the Democratic nomination, and he realized, the Democrats basically say you're Hitler if you're against immigration. So he walked that back and stopped talking about that stuff. But That's because that's the deal for the Democrats to get the voting demographics. Bernie Sanders, what he was talking about when he said this was a Koch brothers policy, was he was like, no, this is what these big corporations want. They want cheap labor. That's not what Bernie Sanders wants. Bernie Sanders wants to like raise wages. I mean, he wants to do it through raising the minimum wage, which I think is a bad plan. But regardless, it's not as simple as a lot of people want to make this thing out to be. It's not. There's more to it, and it's fine to be outraged when you see these kids getting separated from their families. I mean, it's horrific. It really tugs on the heartstrings, and I think that's appropriate. But some of the outrage, man, it's hard to not call out a little bit of the hypocrisy. A little bit of the hypocrisy. I mean, the mainstream media that was nothing but bootlickers for Barack Obama are all of a sudden outraged now when this stuff was happening under Obama. Okay, it's been ramped up a little bit. It's not exactly clear whether that's just because of the zero tolerance policy or because the numbers of immigrants or migrants has been going up over the last couple months. But it's not like people weren't being separated from their families. That was happening under Obama, and you see people like Laura Bush and Jeb Bush weighing in. Laura Bush said, "Oh, this is just an outrage. This is a violation of human rights." Like as if really, right? There were no violations of human rights under your husband George W. Bush's presidency, right? He didn't separate anyone from their families. Well, why don't you, he separated a few 100,000 Iraqis from their families and also separated them from existence. So maybe the Bushes should keep their fucking mouths shut when it comes to, human rights violations. I mean, this is, please, comparing it to the Bushes, this is nothing. By the way, Laura Bush, maybe it's not just her, her deep-rooted morality that makes her speak up. Maybe it's the fact that Donald Trump beat your brother-in-law into a bloody pulp in front of the entire nation, and literally nobody will ever look at him again. No one will ever look at Jeb Bush the same again. He's low-energy Jeb for the rest of his life. So, look, man, as you guys who know me know, I am a, or you could, over here, right? I'm a anarchist libertarian. Okay, like I believe in a stateless society. Ideally, when it comes to this immigration issue, I really don't think moving from Mexico to California or from Mexico to Texas should really fundamentally be any different than moving from New York to New Jersey. But of course, this would be with the absence of a state, and particularly with the absence of a welfare state. And if we just enforce private property borders, you get an apartment, you get a house somewhere, you can go move into it. We wouldn't have to have this issue. We wouldn't have to have government agents with guns rounding people up and separating families. I mean, but it's hard to ignore the position that say the average Trump supporter who supports a crackdown on illegal immigration is in. Look, most of the people who supported Donald Trump they weren't the 1%. They weren't the people who the left, wants to demonize all the time. These were, particularly like in the Rust Belt, in the South, these were people who didn't participate in the Obama recovery. So while you ever look around at, they'll have those, the maps of the richest counties in America, and it's like 6 of the 10 richest counties are right outside of Washington, D.C. The other ones are, a whole bunch of them are right outside of New York City. Well, what do you think? I mean, Obama had record high government spending, right? Okay, at least until Trump pushed that up, but record high government spending. So who's getting all these profits? Well, it's the politically connected. It's not like Washington, D.C. just has more factories, more innovation. It's not Silicon Valley out there. It's not like, oh, they're just profiting in the free market. No, these are the politically connected. And the ones all around New York City, okay, well, these are the banks that got bailed out by Bush and Obama. Okay, these are the guys who there's the recovery. The recovery didn't happen for any of these people in the Rust Belt, okay? So they're sitting there. They've had a family member die in these bullshit wars. They got a kid who's addicted to opioids, opiates or whatever. They lost their home. They're working 2 jobs when they used to work 1. And basically they're still living in the recession of 2008. And now, look, here's the truth, right? So like I said, I believe in a stateless society. And I think that, in that environment, people could just move freely. And there would be no need to worry about any of this immigration stuff. But I am in the minority on that position, okay? So about 99% of people support the existence of a state, right? So when you have the existence of a state, what you have now is this problem. And the problem that you have is that, so all these guys who I'm talking about who didn't participate in the Obama recovery, they're paying taxes. At least the ones that are working, they're still paying taxes. Now, when an immigrant comes into the country, they're immediately getting the benefit of, all the people on the left who go, well, they don't get welfare because they're illegal immigrants. It's like, okay, but they get the police protection. They drive on the roads. They go to public schools. They go to our hospitals. I mean, I could list 10 more things that are paid for by the taxpayers, the domestic population, which is taxed. By the way, they're taxed at the threat of jail. That's what happens if you don't pay your taxes. You get separated from your family, because that's kind of how the state works. You get separated from your family if you go to jail. So at the threat of them being separated from their family, they now have to pay for the immigrants who come into this country. And now it creates this conflict. And look, as I said before, we take in $1 million a year. These are people who are just saying we don't want more on top of that. Feel however you feel. You can be outraged about the policy, but it doesn't make you a Nazi for wanting to cut down on immigration. And I would just ask this. I would say, if for those of you, because you do believe in the state, right? I don't, but the vast majority of people out there do. Okay, so what's the number? What's the number of immigrants that we're expected to take into this country? What's the number of people that the domestic population, the taxpayers, are expected to support? Like, please tell me what charity they're forced to give to other people. By the way, Americans give more to charity than any other group of people in the world. It's not that they're against charity. It's just on top of that, now they're forced to give more. So, look, my main takeaway from this is, yes, it's horrific. It is. I hope the zero tolerance policy ends, but it's a way more complicated issue than everyone who disagrees with you is a bigot. And also, the loudest critics of this policy are outright hypocrites. The media, who were nothing but bootlickers for Obama, now they're going to criticize Trump. The people like the Bushes and stuff like that, and then these congressmen and women who, I mean, oh my! If you're a member of Congress and you're outraged that Trump, what he's doing is enforcing the law with zero tolerance. Now, you may not like the zero tolerance, but it's your law. You wrote the law, and he's enforcing it now. So if you don't want him to enforce it, change the law. You're Congress. You write the laws. So anyway, this issue, I'll probably do another video on it because this issue is going to be with us for a while. I can already tell. This is the Democrats' midterm election issue. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. All right, that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with a new video. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out a longer conversation about this, I did a whole podcast on it today. It's my podcast is part of the problem. GasDigitalNetwork.com. All right, thanks.